The sound of Sophie's muffled cries pierced through the quiet evening, instantly setting my nerves on edge. I paused halfway up the stairs, straining to hear where it was coming from. My daughter's voice, usually so full of joy, now trembled with fear. It was coming from Lydia's room. "Never tell this to your dad or—" Lydia's voice, cold and threatening. My blood ran cold. What the hell was going on? Without hesitation, I bounded up the remaining steps and burst through the door. Sophie's tiny frame shook as she clung to me, burying her tear-stained face in my chest. Lydia stood there, her face a mask of irritation and something else, guilt. "Han, what's the matter?" I asked, stroking Sophie's hair. Sophie pulled back, her big blue eyes brimming with tears. "I saw Mom with Uncle Ron alone. They warned me not to tell you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Uncle Ron, my brother. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "Is this true?" I demanded, fixing Lydia with a steely gaze. Lydia's eyes darted between Sophie and me. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. Sophie's just confused. She must have misunderstood." "Don't." My voice was low, dangerous. "Don't you dare try to gaslight our daughter." Lydia's face hardened. "You're going to believe a child over your own wife? When that child is my daughter?" "Absolutely." I knelt down to Sophie's level, my voice softening. "Sweetheart, can you tell me exactly what you saw?" Sophie hiccuped, wiping her eyes. I came home early from Sarah's house. I heard noises from your bedroom. When I looked inside, I saw Mom and Uncle Ron kissing. They were taking off their clothes. Mom saw me and told me I couldn't tell you. She said you'd be angry." Rage surged through me, hot and potent. I stood slowly, my eyes never leaving Lydia's face. "How long?" Lydia crossed her arms, defiant. "Ethan, you're blowing this way out of proportion." "How long?" She sighed, rolling her eyes. "A few months. It doesn't mean anything. Ron and I just connect in a way you and I don't anymore." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Connect? Is that what you call fucking my brother behind my back?" "Daddy?" Sophie's small voice cut through the tension. "What does that mean?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. "Nothing, sweetheart. Adult stuff. Why don't you go to your room for a bit? I need to talk to your mom." Sophie nodded, casting a wary glance at Lydia before scurrying out. As soon as the door closed, I rounded on my wife. "You disgust me," I spat. "Not only did you betray me, but you tried to silence our daughter? Threaten her?" Lydia's facade cracked, desperation seeping through. "Ethan, please. We can work this out. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed again, the sound devoid of humor. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This is a choice. A series of choices. Every time you met up with him, every lie you told me, every moment you put your selfish desires above our family." "What about our family?" Lydia pleaded. "Think about Sophie. We can go to counseling, work through this." "There is no we anymore," I said, my voice cold and final. "You lost any right to talk about our family the moment you decided to fuck my brother." Lydia's eyes widened, realization dawning. "Ethan, no. You can't. Watch me." I strode to the closet, yanking out a suitcase. "Pack your shit. You're leaving. Now. You can't just throw me out." Lydia shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "This is my house too." I whirled on her, my voice a low growl. "You lost any claim to this house when you brought that bastard into our bed. Now pack, or I'll do it for you." Lydia stood there, shell-shocked, as I started throwing her clothes into the suitcase. You can't do this. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't give a damn," I snarled. "Go to Ron. Go to a hotel. Sleep in your car for all I care. But you're not staying here another minute." As I continued packing, Lydia's shock gave way to anger. "You'll regret this, Ethan. I'll take you for everything you've got. The house, the money. Sophie." I laughed, the sound harsh and mirthless. "Good luck with that. You really think a judge is going to side with the cheating wife who tried to intimidate her own daughter into silence? Pack your shit and get out before I throw you out myself." Lydia's face contorted with rage. She lunged forward, slapping me hard across the face. I caught her wrist before she could strike again, my grip firm but not bruising. "Don't," I warned, my voice low and dangerous. "You've already crossed enough lines. Don't make this worse for yourself." I released her wrist and she stumbled back, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the stranger who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. "You have 5 minutes," I said, my tone brooking no argument. "Then I'm calling the police and having you removed for trespassing." Lydia's shoulders sagged in defeat. She moved around the room, gathering essentials and shoving them into the suitcase. I watched her silently, my mind racing with plans for what came next. As she zipped up the suitcase, Lydia turned to me one last time. "Can I at least say goodbye to Sophie?" "Absolutely not," I said, my voice hard. "You lost that right when you tried to use her as a pawn in your sick game. I'll explain things to her when she's ready." Lydia's face crumpled, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her choices. Now she had to live with the consequences. I followed her downstairs, watching as she struggled with the suitcase. Part of me wanted to help her. Old habits die hard. But I squashed that impulse ruthlessly. She didn't deserve my help. Not anymore. As we reached the front door, I caught sight of our neighbor, Jake, watching from his porch with concern. I gave him a brief nod, silently communicating that I'd explain later. Lydia paused at the threshold, turning to face me one last time. "Ethan, please. Don't do this. We can work it out. For Sophie's sake. Don't you dare use our daughter as a bargaining chip," I snarled. "You lost any right to talk about what's best for her. Get out. Now." With that, I slammed the door in her face, cutting off whatever pathetic plea she was about to make. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was done. My marriage was over. But as the initial shock faded, a new emotion took its place. Determination. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Lydia and Ron had no idea what was coming for them. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Sophie?" I called out. "Can you come down here, sweetheart? We need to talk." As I heard her small footsteps on the stairs, I vowed silently that I would do whatever it took to protect her, and to make sure Lydia and Ron paid for their betrayal, no matter what it cost me. I barely slept that night, my mind a whirlwind of anger and plans for retribution. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains, I made a decision. It was time to confront Ron. After dropping Sophie off at school with a promise that everything would be okay, I drove to Ron's office. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, rage simmering just beneath the surface. I strode into the sleek, modern building, bypassing the receptionist who tried to stop me. "Sir, you can't just..." I ignored her, pushing open the door to Ron's corner office. He looked up, surprise quickly morphing into fear as he saw my expression. "Ethan, what are you?" I cut him off, my voice low and dangerous. "You have exactly 1 minute to explain yourself before I beat the living shit out of you." Ron's eyes darted to the door, but I blocked his escape route. "Look, Ethan, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snarled. "How you've been fucking my wife behind my back. How you helped her threaten my daughter into silence." Ron's face paled. "Sophie told you?" "Ethan, it's not what you think." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Not what I think. Please, enlighten me. What possible explanation could you have for betraying your own brother?" Ron stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "It just happened. Lydia and we connected. We didn't mean for it to go this far." "Connected?" I spat the word like poison. "Is that what you call it? You didn't just betray me, Ron. You betrayed Sophie. Our parents. Our entire family." "I know, and I'm sorry," Ron said, his voice pleading. "We can work this out, Ethan. As a family." That was the last straw. I lunged forward, grabbing Ron by his expensive silk tie. "We are not family," I growled, my face inches from his. "You lost any right to call yourself my brother the moment you touched my wife." Ron struggled, trying to break free. "Ethan, please." Think about what you're doing. You could lose everything. I laughed again, the sound cold and mirthless. Lose everything? Thanks to you and Lydia, I already have. But trust me, little brother, you haven't seen anything yet. With that, I shoved him back, watching with satisfaction as he stumbled against his desk. Consider this your only warning, I said, my voice deathly calm. Stay away from me. Stay away from Sophie, or I promise you, you'll regret the day you were born. As I turned to leave, Ron called out, desperation in his voice. Ethan, wait. We can fix this. Just give me a chance to explain. I paused at the door, not bothering to turn around. There's nothing to explain, Ron. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. I strode out of the office, ignoring the shocked looks from Ron's colleagues. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Saw what happened last night. You okay? Need to talk? I hesitated for a moment before replying. Yeah. Meet me at O'Malley's in 20. As I drove to the bar, my mind raced with possibilities. Jake had always been a good friend, someone I could trust. Maybe it was time to let someone else in on what was happening. O'Malley's was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few regulars nursing their midday beers. Jake was already there, 2 whiskeys on the table in front of him. Figured you could use something stronger than beer, he said as I sat down. I nodded gratefully, downing half the whiskey in one gulp. The burn in my throat was a welcome distraction from the pain in my chest. So, Jake said, his voice carefully neutral, want to tell me what's going on? I took a deep breath, then spilled everything. Lydia's affair with Ron, Sophie catching them, their attempt to silence her. By the time I finished, Jake's face was a mask of barely contained rage. Those bastards, he growled. Ethan, I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? I looked at him, really looked at him. Jake had been my friend for years, always there when I needed him. Maybe it was time to trust someone else. I'm going to destroy them, I said, my voice low and intense. Not just divorce, not just public humiliation. I want to ruin their lives the way they've ruined mine. Jake nodded slowly, a glint of understanding in his eyes. You need resources, information, a team. Yeah, I admitted. I can't do this alone, but I need people I can trust absolutely. Jake leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. I might know some people. Ex-military, off the books. They specialize in information gathering. I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that illegal? Jake shrugged. Only if you get caught. And trust me, these guys don't get caught. I considered for a moment, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Finally, I nodded. Set it up. But Jake? Jake's eyes hardened. Ethan, you're like a brother to me. More of a brother than that piece of shit Ron ever was. I'm with you all the way. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone. Thanks, Jake. I mean it. Jake nodded, then pulled out his phone. I'll make some calls. In the meantime, we need to start gathering evidence. Anything you can get on Lydia and Ron. Bank statements, emails, phone records. Anything that could be useful. I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. I'll get on it. And Jake, we need to keep this quiet. The less people know, the better. Agreed, Jake said, finishing his whiskey. We'll meet again in a few days. I'll have more information by then. As I walked out of O'Malley's, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Lydia and Ron thought they could destroy my life and get away with it. They had no idea what was coming. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. I threw myself into gathering every scrap of information I could find on Lydia and Ron. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, anything that could potentially be useful. Jake had come through with his contacts. We were meeting tonight to discuss our next steps. I'd asked Emily and Peter, Jake's wife and brother, to join us. If we were going to do this, we needed a tight-knit team we could trust implicitly. As I pulled up to Jake and Emily's house, I saw Peter's car already in the driveway. Good. We were all here. Emily opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug. Oh, Ethan, she murmured. I'm so sorry about everything. I returned the hug, grateful for the support. Thanks, Em. Is everyone here? She nodded, leading me into the living room where Jake and Peter were waiting. The coffee table was covered in laptops, files, and what looked like surveillance equipment. Ethan, Peter greeted me with a firm handshake. How are you holding up? I shrugged, taking a seat. As well as can be expected. Sophie's struggling, but she's tough. She'll get through this. Jake handed me a beer. And how about you? You want to go through with this? I took a long pull from the bottle, considering my answer carefully. Lydia and Ron, they didn't just betray me. They threatened my daughter, used her as a pawn in their sick game. I can't let that stand. Emily leaned forward, her eyes serious. Ethan, we're with you, but you need to understand the risks. What we're planning, it's not exactly legal. I nodded, my jaw set. I know, but neither was what they did to me, to Sophie. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Peter spoke up, his voice calm and measured. All right, let's break this down. What exactly are we trying to accomplish here? I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. I want to destroy them. Not just divorce Lydia and cut ties with Ron. I want to ruin their lives the way they've ruined mine. Jake leaned in, his eyes gleaming. We start with their social lives. Expose the affair. Make sure everyone in their circles knows what they did. Emily nodded, already typing on her laptop. I can handle that. I've got connections in their social circles. A few well-placed rumors, some anonymous tips. Good, I said. But that's just the beginning. I want to hit them where it really hurts. Their careers, their finances. Peter raised an eyebrow. That's where things get tricky. We'll need solid evidence, stuff that can't be traced back to us. I pulled out a flash drive, tossing it on the table. I've got everything I could find on their financials. Bank statements, credit card records. There's got to be something we can use. Jake picked up the drive, a slow smile spreading across his face. Oh, there will be. My contacts can dig deeper, find the dirt these two have tried to bury. What about Sophie? Emily asked softly. How does she fit into all this? I felt a pang in my chest at the mention of my daughter. She stays out of it. Completely. As far as she knows, Lydia and I are getting divorced. End of story. The others nodded in agreement. Peter leaned forward, his expression serious. Ethan, are you absolutely sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. I met his gaze, my resolve hardening. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They chose to betray me, to threaten my daughter. Now they get to face the consequences. Jake raised his beer bottle. To justice, then, and to making those bastards pay. We clinked our bottles together, the sound echoing in the quiet room. As I looked around at my friends, my team, I felt a surge of gratitude. I wasn't alone in this fight. All right, I said, setting down my beer. Let's get to work. Emily, start spreading those rumors. Make sure everyone in their social circles knows exactly what kind of people Lydia and Ron really are. Emily nodded, her fingers flying over her keyboard. Consider it done. By this time tomorrow, they'll be social pariahs. I turned to Jake. Can your contacts dig deeper into their finances? I want to know every dirty secret, every skeleton in their closets. Jake grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. Oh, they'll find it. Trust me, if there's dirt to be dug up, my guys will find it. Good, I said. Peter, I need you to look into their professional lives. Any weaknesses we can exploit, any colleagues we can turn against them. Peter nodded, already making notes. I've got some ideas. Leave it to me. As we continued planning late into the night, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Lydia and Ron thought they could destroy my life and get away with it. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. Dozens of missed calls, texts, and social media notifications. It had begun. I scrolled through the messages, friends, colleagues, even distant acquaintances, all expressing shock and disgust at Lydia and Ron's betrayal. Emily's plan had worked like a charm. My phone rang again. It was Lydia. I answered, my voice cold. What do you want? Ethan, what the hell have you done? Lydia's voice was shrill, panicked. Everyone knows. How could you? I cut her off. How could I? That's rich, coming from you. I didn't do anything, Lydia. The truth has a way of coming out. You bastard, she hissed. You've ruined everything. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. No, Lydia. You and Ron did that all on your own. I'm just making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you are. This isn't over, she threatened. I hung up, cutting off her tirade. My phone immediately buzzed again. Ron this time. I ignored it. A text from Jake popped up. It's working. They're in full panic mode. Meet at my place in an hour? I texted back a quick affirmative, then headed to the shower. As the hot water washed over me, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Now for the real destruction to begin. An hour later, I was seated in Jake's living room, surrounded by laptops and files. Emily was furiously typing away, her face lit by the blue glow of her screen. You should see their social media, she said, not looking up. It's a bloodbath. Every post, every photo, people are tearing them apart. Jake nodded approvingly. Good. Let them feel what it's like to be betrayed, to have their lives torn apart in public. I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. What's next? We need to keep the pressure on. Peter cleared his throat. I've been digging into their professional lives. Lydia's PR firm is already distancing themselves from her. One more push and she'll be out on her ass. Do it, I said without hesitation. Make sure every client, every contact knows exactly what kind of person they're dealing with. Emily looked up from her screen. What about Ron? His law firm is more resilient. They might try to weather the storm. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Then we'll just have to make the storm worse. Jake, what have your contacts found? Jake pulled out a thick file, his eyes gleaming. Oh, you're going to love this. Seems our dear brother Ron has been playing fast and loose with client funds. Nothing major enough to get noticed, until now. I raised an eyebrow. Can we prove it? Jake nodded. Every transaction, every cooked book. It's all here. One anonymous tip to the Bar Association and Ron's career is over. I sat back, considering our options. Do it, but not yet. Let's let them stew for a bit, see if they try to fight back. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Another text from Lydia. Please, Ethan, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I showed the others, watching their reactions. Emily's face hardened. Don't fall for it, Ethan. It's a trap. I know, I said, my voice cold. But maybe it's time for a little face-to-face confrontation. Let them see exactly what they're up against. Jake leaned forward, concern etched on his face. They might try something desperate. I nodded, my mind made up. Set it up. Neutral ground, somewhere public. I want witnesses for whatever goes down. As the others started making arrangements, I felt a familiar surge of anger and determination. Lydia and Ron thought they could manipulate me, play on my emotions. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. An hour later, I was seated in a busy cafe, my back to the wall, a clear view of the entrance. I saw them before they saw me, Lydia and Ron, looking haggard and desperate. As they approached my table, I kept my face impassive. Sit, I said coldly. Lydia slid into the seat across from me, her eyes red-rimmed. Ron hesitated, then took the chair next to her. I noticed how they instinctively leaned away from each other. Trouble in paradise already? Ethan, Lydia began, her voice trembling. Please, we need to talk about this. What you're doing, it's destroying us. I raised an eyebrow. And what you did didn't destroy me. Didn't threaten to destroy Sophie's life? Ron spoke up, his voice low and urgent. Brother, please. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But this vendetta, it's gone too far. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Too far? You haven't seen anything yet. This is just the beginning. Lydia reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled back as if burned. Ethan, think about Sophie. What will this do to her? Seeing her parents at war like this? My eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare use Sophie as a shield. You lost that right when you tried to silence her, to make her complicit in your betrayal. Ron leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. What do you want, Ethan? Money? We can make this right. Just tell us what it'll take to end this. I stared at him, my voice like ice. What I want, dear brother, is for you both to suffer, to lose everything, the way I have. And trust me, by the time I'm done, you'll wish I'd just taken your money. Lydia's face crumpled. Ethan, please. We're sorry. We never meant. I cut her off. Sorry? You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry your perfect little lives are falling apart. Well, get used to it. Because this is just the beginning. I stood, looking down at them with contempt. Enjoy what's left of your lives, while you still can. As I walked away, I heard Lydia break down in sobs. Ron's voice, trying to comfort her, faded as I pushed through the cafe door. Outside, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I pulled out my phone, dialing Jake's number. It's done, I said when he answered. They're desperate, scrambling. Time to move to phase 2. Jake said, you got it. I'll make the calls. By this time tomorrow, Ron's career will be in shambles. I hung up, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Lydia and Ron thought they'd seen the worst of it. They had no idea what was coming next. The destruction had only just begun. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Jake, his voice urgent and excited. Ethan, turn on the news. Now. I fumbled for the remote, flicking on the TV. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen made my heart race. Prominent lawyer Ronald Winters accused of embezzlement. The anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking turn of events, Ronald Winters, partner at the prestigious law firm of Winters & Associates, has been accused of embezzling client funds. An anonymous tip to the Bar Association led to an investigation that uncovered years of financial misconduct. I muted the TV, a cold smile spreading across my face. Well done, Jake. How's Ron taking it? Jake's laugh was dark and satisfied. Oh, you should see him. He's in full panic mode. The firm's already distancing themselves, talking about an internal investigation. He'll be out on his ass by the end of the day. I nodded, even though Jake couldn't see me. Good. And Lydia? That's the best part, Jake said, his voice gleeful. Turns out our dear sister-in-law has been living quite the lavish lifestyle on Ron's dime. There are records of transfers from his accounts to hers, expensive gifts, luxury vacations. She's been implicated in the whole mess. I felt a surge of savage satisfaction. Perfect. Let's turn up the heat. Emily still working her magic on social media? Oh yeah, Jake confirmed. By the time she's done, Lydia and Ron will be social pariahs. No one will touch them with a 10-foot pole. I hung up, my mind racing with possibilities. It was time to confront Lydia again, to watch her world crumble in person. An hour later, I was standing outside our old house, my house now. Lydia's car was in the driveway, exactly where I knew it would be. I knocked on the door, hard and insistent. Lydia opened it, her eyes red and puffy. When she saw me, her face crumpled. Ethan, please. You have to stop this. It's gone too far. I pushed past her into the house. Too far? Lydia, this is just the beginning. How does it feel, watching your perfect little world fall apart? She followed me into the living room, her voice desperate. Ethan, I know we hurt you, but this is destroying us. Think about Sophie. What will this do to her? I whirled on her, my eyes blazing. Don't you dare bring Sophie into this. You lost that right when you tried to use her as a pawn in your sick game. Lydia collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. What do you want from us, Ethan? Just tell me. We'll do anything. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. What I want, dear wife, is for you and Ron to suffer, to lose everything, the way I have. And trust me, we're just getting started. Lydia looked up, her eyes wide with fear. What do you mean? I smiled coldly. You think the embezzlement charges are bad? Just wait. By the time I'm done, you and Ron won't have a penny to your names. No jobs, no friends, no future. You'll wish I'd just taken everything in the divorce. You can't do this, Lydia whispered, her voice trembling. It's not legal. I leaned in close, my voice low and dangerous. And what you did was betraying me, threatening our daughter? You chose this path, Lydia. Now you get to see where it leads. As if on cue, Lydia's phone buzzed. She picked it up, her face paling as she read the message. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "What is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Lydia looked up at me, her eyes filled with despair. "My firm, they're letting me go. Effective immediately. Something about moral turpitude and damage to the company's reputation." I nodded, satisfaction coursing through me. "Ah, yes, I imagine your little scandal has made you quite the liability. Tell me, Lydia, how does it feel to lose everything?" She lunged at me then, her hands clawing at my shirt. "You bastard! You've ruined everything?" I caught her wrists easily, holding her at arm's length. "No, Lydia. You and Ron did that all on your own. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." I released her, watching as she crumpled to the floor. As I turned to leave, I paused at the door. "Oh, and Lydia? I'd start packing if I were you. This house will be on the market by the end of the week." Her sobs followed me out the door, a symphony of despair that filled me with satisfaction. As I got into my car, I pulled out my phone, dialing Jake's number. "It's done," I said when he answered. "Lydia's out of a job, and judging by her reaction, Ron's not far behind. Time for phase 3. Jake's voice was eager. "The financial takedown? I've got everything ready. One more push and their accounts will be drained, their credit ruined. They'll be living out of cardboard boxes by the end of the month." I nodded, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Do it. And Jake? Make it hurt." Lydia and Ron had thought they could destroy my life and get away with it. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The game wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jake and his team worked tirelessly, digging up every piece of dirt they could find on Lydia and Ron. Emily continued her social media assault, ensuring that every friend, colleague, and acquaintance knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. I was in Jake's living room, surrounded by laptops and files, when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Winters?" A gruff voice came through the speaker. "This is David Lynch. I'm a private investigator hired by your wife and brother. They're looking for dirt on you." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Is that so, Mr. Lynch? And why are you telling me this?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Let's just say I don't like being used as a pawn in someone else's game. Your wife and brother. They're not good people, are they?" I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "No, Mr. Lynch, they're not. But I'm curious, what made you reach out to me?" Lynch's voice lowered. "I've been in this business a long time, Mr. Winters. I can smell a setup from a mile away. They're trying to frame you for something. Something big." I sat up straighter, my mind racing. "Go on." "They've been planting evidence," Lynch continued. "Fake financial records, doctored emails. They're trying to make it look like you're the one who embezzled the money, not your brother." I felt a surge of rage, quickly followed by a cold determination. "Thank you for this information, Mr. Lynch. I appreciate your honesty." "Don't mention it," Lynch replied. "Just be careful, Mr. Winters. These people are desperate. There's no telling what they might do." As I hung up, I turned to Jake, who had been listening intently. "You hear that?" Jake nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Oh yeah. Looks like Lydia and Ron are trying to play hardball. Too bad for them. We're always one step ahead." I stood, pacing the room as my mind raced with possibilities. "We need to turn this around on them. Use their own trap against them." Emily looked up from her laptop. "I might have an idea. If they're planting fake evidence, why don't we plant some of our own? But make it look like they're the ones doing the framing?" A slow smile spread across my face. "Emily, you're a genius. Jake, can your contacts make this happen?" Jake was already on his phone. "Consider it done. By this time tomorrow, Lydia and Ron will be caught red-handed trying to frame you. It'll be the final nail in their coffin." I nodded, satisfaction coursing through me. "Good. And while we're at it, let's make sure the authorities get an anonymous tip about their little scheme. I want them to feel the full weight of the law coming down on them." Lydia and Ron thought they could outmaneuver me, turn the tables in their favor. They were about to learn just how badly they'd underestimated me. The next day, I received a call from Detective Sarah Caldwell. Her voice was crisp and professional. "Mr. Winters, I need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in your case." I arrived at the police station, my face a mask of concerned innocence. Detective Caldwell met me in the lobby, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Winters," she said, leading me to an interview room, "we've uncovered some disturbing evidence. It appears your wife and brother were attempting to frame you for the embezzlement charges." I feigned surprise. "What? That's unbelievable. How did you find out?" Caldwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "An anonymous tip led us to some incriminating evidence. Emails, financial records, all pointing to an elaborate scheme to pin the embezzlement on you." I shook my head, playing the part of the shocked, betrayed husband. "I can't believe they would do this. After everything." Caldwell leaned forward. "Mr. Winters, I have to ask, did you have any knowledge of this scheme?" I met her gaze steadily. "Absolutely not, Detective. I knew my wife and brother had betrayed me, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "We've brought them in for questioning. Given the evidence we've uncovered, they're facing serious charges. Attempted fraud, obstruction of justice, not to mention the original embezzlement charges." I let out a shaky breath. "What happens now?" "Now," Caldwell said, standing up, "we build our case. You're free to go, Mr. Winters. But don't leave town. We may have more questions for you as the investigation progresses." As I left the station, I felt a surge of triumph. Lydia and Ron had played right into my hands. Their desperate attempt to turn the tables had only sealed their fate. I pulled out my phone, dialing Jake's number. "It's done," I said when he answered. "They took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker." Jake's laugh was dark and satisfied. "Perfect. How does it feel, knowing they're going down for trying to frame you?" I smiled, cold and vicious. "It feels like justice, Jake. Pure, sweet justice." Lydia and Ron had thought they could destroy my life and get away with it. Now they were about to learn the true meaning of consequences. The game was nearly over, and I had won. The days following Lydia and Ron's arrest passed in a blur. I focused on Sophie, trying to shield her from the worst of the fallout. But kids at school talk, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. We were having breakfast when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Detective Sarah Caldwell standing there. "Mr. Winters," she said, her voice tight. "We need to talk." I ushered her in, my mind racing. Had they discovered my involvement in framing Lydia and Ron? But Caldwell's next words knocked the wind out of me. "We've uncovered some disturbing information," she said, sitting at the kitchen table. "It appears your brother, Ron, was involved in something much bigger than simple embezzlement." I leaned forward, genuinely curious now. "What do you mean?" Caldwell's eyes met mine. "Corporate espionage. Ron was using Lydia to smuggle valuable secrets from your firm. We believe he was planning to not just ruin your career, but steal your entire business." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. That's impossible." "How?" "Lydia," Caldwell explained, her voice softening slightly. "She had access to your home office, your personal files. We found evidence that she'd been photographing documents, sending them to Ron for months." I felt a surge of rage so potent it nearly choked me. "Those bastards," I snarled. "It wasn't enough to betray me personally. They had to go after my livelihood too?" Caldwell nodded, her expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Winters. I know this must come as a shock." I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "A shock? Detective, that's the understatement of the century." She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Mr. Winters, Ethan, I have to ask, did you have any suspicion about this? Any idea what they were planning?" I met her gaze steadily, years of boardroom negotiations coming to my aid. "Not a clue, Detective. I knew they'd betrayed me, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." Caldwell nodded, seemingly satisfied. "We'll need your cooperation as we build our case. Ron and Lydia are facing serious charges. Industrial espionage, conspiracy. They're looking at significant prison time." I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. "Of course, Detective. Whatever you need. As Caldwell left, I sank back into my chair, my head spinning. Ron's betrayal went deeper than I'd ever imagined. The rage I'd felt before was nothing compared to the inferno burning in my chest now. I pulled out my phone, dialing Jake's number. "Get everyone together," I said when he answered. "We need to talk. Now." An hour later, I was pacing Jake's living room, the others watching me with concern. Corporate espionage. I spat, my voice shaking with fury. They weren't just trying to ruin me personally. They were going after my entire business. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Ethan. That's horrible." Jake's eyes narrowed. "What are you thinking, Ethan? What's our next move?" I stopped pacing, turning to face them. "We destroy them. Completely. No mercy, no quarter. I want Ron and Lydia buried so deep they'll never see the light of day again." Peter leaned forward, his expression serious. "Ethan, are you sure? This is a whole new level of retaliation. There's no coming back from this." I laughed, the sound cold and mirthless. "Come back?" "Peter, there was no coming back the moment they decided to betray me, to use my daughter as a pawn in their sick game. Now it's war." Jake nodded. "I'm with you, Ethan. Whatever it takes." Emily and Peter exchanged a look, then nodded their agreement. "We're in," Emily said. "What's the plan?" I sat down, leaning forward intently. "We gather every scrap of evidence we can find. Emails, financial records, phone logs. I want irrefutable proof of their conspiracy." Jake was already on his laptop. "My contacts can get us access to Ron's work computer. If there's evidence there, we'll find it." "Good," I nodded. "Emily, I need you to keep working your magic on social media. I want everyone in our industry to know exactly what kind of people Ron and Lydia are." Emily nodded, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "Consider it done. By the time I'm finished, they won't be able to get a job flipping burgers." I turned to Peter. "I need you to reach out to our contacts in the media. Once we have the evidence, I want this story blown wide open. Front page news, primetime coverage. I want Ron and Lydia's faces plastered everywhere as the corporate traitors they are." Peter pulled out his phone. "I'll start making calls. We'll make sure this story can't be buried or spun." As the others sprang into action, I felt a cold determination settle over me. Ron and Lydia had tried to take everything from me. My marriage, my daughter, my business. Now they were going to learn the true meaning of loss. The final act of this drama was about to begin, and I intended to make it a performance they'd never forget. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jake and his team worked tirelessly, digging through Ron's digital life. Emily's social media campaign was in full swing, turning public opinion firmly against Ron and Lydia. Peter had lined up interviews with major news outlets, ready to break the story wide open. I was in my home office, reviewing the mountain of evidence we'd gathered, when my phone rang. It was Jake. "Ethan," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "We got it. Emails, financial records, recorded conversations. It's all here. Ron and Lydia's entire conspiracy, laid out in black and white." I felt a surge of savage satisfaction. "Excellent work, Jake. Send everything to Peter. It's time to go public." As I hung up, I heard a small voice from the doorway. "Dad? What's going on?" I turned to see Sophie standing there, her eyes wide with concern. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice light. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Just some work stuff." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Is it about Mom and Uncle Ron? Are they in trouble?" I sighed, kneeling down to her level. "Sophie, honey, your mom and Uncle Ron did some very bad things. They're going to have to face the consequences of their actions. Are they going to jail?" Sophie's voice trembled slightly. I nodded, my heart aching for her. "Probably yes. But that's not something you need to worry about. I promise, I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Sophie threw her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. I held her tight, my resolve hardening. Everything I was doing, all of it was for her. To protect her, to secure her future. As Sophie went back to her room, I returned to my desk, pulling up the news on my laptop. It was time. The story broke like a tsunami. Every major news outlet ran with it, the headlines screaming betrayal and corporate espionage. Ron and Lydia's faces were everywhere, their crimes laid bare for the world to see. My phone buzzed constantly. Colleagues, friends, even competitors, all expressing shock and offering support. I played my part perfectly, the betrayed husband and businessman, gracious in the face of such treachery. Late that night, as the media frenzy reached its peak, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Ethan?" Lydia's voice, small and broken. "Please, we need to talk." I felt a surge of cold fury. "There's nothing to talk about, Lydia. You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." "Ethan, please," she begged. "You don't understand. Ron, he manipulated me. He said if I didn't help him, he'd hurt Sophie." I laughed, the sound harsh and mirthless. "Save your lies, Lydia. We both know the truth. You chose this path. You betrayed me, betrayed our daughter. And for what? Money? Power?" There was a pause, then Lydia's voice came back, harder now. "You smug bastard. You think you've won? This isn't over, Ethan. We'll—" I cut her off. "It is over, Lydia. It was over the moment you decided to betray me. Enjoy your new life. I hear prison can be quite educational." I hung up. Lydia and Ron had played their final card and lost. Now it was time to end this, once and for all. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Caldwell. "Mr. Winters? We've just received word. Lydia Winter was apprehended at the airport, attempting to flee the country." I feigned surprise. "What? That's unbelievable. I can't believe she'd try to run." Caldwell's voice was sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Winters. I know this must be difficult for you. But rest assured, both Lydia and Ron will face the full consequences of their actions." As I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. The final pieces were falling into place. Lydia and Ron's desperate attempt to escape had only sealed their fate. I dialed Jake's number. "It's done," I said when he answered. "Lydia tried to run. They caught her at the airport." Jake's laugh was dark and satisfied. "Perfect. That's the final nail in their coffin. How does it feel, Ethan, knowing it's finally over?" I paused, considering. "It feels right, Jake. Like justice has finally been served." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Lydia and Ron had tried to destroy me, to take everything I held dear. Instead, they destroyed themselves. The months following Ron and Lydia's arrest passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media attention. Through it all, I focused on Sophie, shielding her as best I could from the worst of the fallout. As the dust began to settle, I made a decision. It was time for a fresh start. "Sophie," I said one evening over dinner, "how would you feel about moving? Starting somewhere new?" Sophie looked up from her plate, her eyes wide. "Move? But what about school? My friends?" I reached across the table, taking her small hand in mine. "I know it's a big change, sweetheart, but I think it could be good for us. A chance to start over, away from all the bad memories." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad, if you think it's best." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I do, honey. And hey, maybe we can get that dog you've always wanted in our new place." Sophie's face lit up at that, and for the first time in months, I saw a genuine smile spread across her face. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. House hunting, packing, saying goodbyes. Jake, Emily, and Peter were invaluable, helping with everything from finding a new school for Sophie to setting up our new home. As we stood in front of our new house, boxes piled around us, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Well," Jake said, clapping me on the shoulder, "this is quite a place, Ethan. Fresh start, just like you wanted." I nodded, surveying the new house. "It's perfect. Sophie's already picking out colors for her room." Emily approached, a stack of papers in her hand. "I've got the information on that new business venture you were interested in. Looks promising." I took the papers, flipping through them. "Thanks, Emily. With you and Peter on board, I think we can make this work." Peter joined us, his arm around his wife. "We're with you all the way, Ethan. After everything we've been through, it'll be good to focus on something positive." As we stood there, planning our new future, I heard a voice call out from next door. "Hello there. You must be the new neighbors." I turned to see a woman approaching, her smile warm and genuine. "I'm Hannah Miller," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood." I shook her hand, feeling an unexpected spark. "Ethan Winters. And this is my daughter, Sophie." Sophie peeked out from behind me, giving Hannah a shy wave. Hannah's smile widened. "It's lovely to meet you both. If you need any help settling in, don't hesitate to ask." As Hannah chatted with us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there was room in our new life for more than just business and revenge. Weeks turned into months. The new business thrived, with Jake and Peter proving to be invaluable partners. Sophie settled into her new school, making friends and slowly healing from the trauma of the past year. And Hannah became a constant presence in our lives. At first, just a friendly neighbor, then a close friend, and finally, something more. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching Sophie play with her new dog, Hannah turned to me. "Ethan," she said softly, "I know you've been through a lot, and I understand if you're not ready, but I want you to know, I'm here, for both of you." I looked at her, really looked at her. In her eyes, I saw warmth, understanding, and something that looked a lot like love. "Hannah," I said, taking her hand, "you've become such an important part of our lives. Sophie adores you. And I think I'm falling in love with you." Hannah's eyes welled up with tears. "Oh, Ethan, I love you too. Both of you." As we kissed, I heard Sophie's delighted giggle. I looked up to see her beaming at us, the dog wagging its tail beside her. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. We had weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and found a new path forward. The next day, I received an unexpected visitor at the office. Detective Caldwell stood in the doorway, a slight smile on her face. "Mr. Winters," she said, "I hope I'm not interrupting." I gestured for her to enter. "Not at all, Detective. What can I do for you?" Caldwell sat down, her expression turning serious. "I wanted to update you personally. The case against Ron and Lydia is airtight. They're looking at significant prison time." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "Thank you for letting me know." Caldwell leaned forward. "There's more, Mr. Winters. The investigation into Ron's activities, it uncovered a much larger network of corporate crime. Your assistance was invaluable in breaking this case wide open." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. "I'm glad I could help, Detective." Caldwell stood, extending her hand. "We could use someone with your insights, Mr. Winters. If you're ever interested in consulting on similar cases, the door is open." As she left, I sat back in my chair, considering her offer. It was an intriguing possibility, a chance to use my experiences to help others, to prevent them from going through what I had. That evening, as Hannah, Sophie, and I sat around the dinner table, I shared Detective Caldwell's offer. Sophie's eyes widened. "Like a superhero, Dad? Fighting bad guys?" I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Not quite, sweetheart. But maybe a chance to do some good." Hannah squeezed my hand. "I think it's a wonderful idea, Ethan. If anyone can help people avoid that kind of pain, it's you." As I looked around the table at my new family, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in a long time. The past year had been a crucible, burning away the old and forging something new and stronger. Lydia and Ron had tried to destroy me, to take everything I held dear. Instead, they'd set me on a path to a life better than I could have imagined. The game was truly over, and in winning, I'd found something far more valuable than revenge, a new beginning, filled with love, purpose, and hope.